Welcome to Sleepness Scientist, the channel where science drifts softly into your mind to help you relax, unwind, and maybe even fall asleep. Tonight, we're venturing into one of the brain's most underrated superpowers. Forgetting? Yes, you heard that right. Not remembering everything might just be the smartest thing your brain does. So if you've ever blanked on someone's name 5 seconds after they said it, maybe you're not forgetful. Maybe you're optimized. Tonight, let's dive into why the brain needs to forget things. Thank you for choosing to spend time here with this video. If by any chance I've interrupted your cozy descent into dreamland or added a few neurons of curiosity to your mental traffic, I'm sorry. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your current location and what time it is where you are. We're building a sleepy, curious community of global night owls. Now, let's get into this beautifully bizarre thing your brain insists on doing. Memory is often thought of as a treasure chest, carefully storing every shiny moment we encounter. But this idea is, frankly, more fantasy than function. The human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, and each neuron can form thousands of connections with others. This means the potential for storing information is massive. Estimates suggest the storage capacity of the human brain is around 2.5 petabytes. That's the digital equivalent of about 3 million hours of TV shows. You could binge-watch your way through history, science, and every cat video ever made and still not hit full capacity. And yet, we forget where we put our keys. This isn't a design flaw, it's a feature. Memory isn't just about remembering, it's about efficiently managing information, relevance, and attention. The brain is a master at pruning. It gets rid of what doesn't matter, so you're not overwhelmed by irrelevant data like what socks you wore on March 3, 2009. Unless you had a really weird sock day. Your brain lets it go. That's not just convenience, it's survival. Take the hippocampus, your brain's memory headquarters. One of its jobs is to evaluate what gets stored and what gets tossed. But it's not some meticulous librarian keeping orderly files. It's more like a nightclub bouncer. Some memories get, and others wait outside forever. But the criteria for entry isn't fairness, it's usefulness. Emotional impact, novelty, repetition. These are the VIP passes of memory. But even memories that get in aren't permanent residents. They undergo a process called synaptic remodeling, where neural connections are reinforced or weakened. This isn't just about memory loss from age, it's active forgetting. The brain deploys specialized cells, like microglia, to trim away unused synapses. Think of them as neural gardeners, pruning away mental weeds so the brain doesn't become a tangled jungle of useless trivia. Why does this matter? Because forgetting is essential for learning. Counterintuitive, maybe, but true. In 2007, researchers from the University of Toronto proposed a theory. The purpose of memory is not the perfect preservation of the past, but rather the optimization of future decision-making. Retaining only what's essential means the brain can generalize experiences and apply knowledge more flexibly. If you remembered every instance of crossing a street, you'd be paralyzed by detail when faced with a new one. Instead, you forget the unnecessary and abstract the pattern. Look both ways, dodge cars, walk fast. The phenomenon even has a name: adaptive forgetting, and it's more common than we notice. In fact, studies suggest that the average person forgets approximately 80% of new information within a few days, unless it's reinforced. That's not laziness. That's your brain deciding what's worthy. Even traumatic memories are not exempt. In disorders like PTSD, the inability to forget traumatic events becomes a source of suffering. The normal neural pruning mechanisms falter, and instead of fading, the memory loops in high resolution. Interestingly, this has led to therapeutic research into enhancing forgetting, not as a way of erasing the past, but as a method for emotional regulation and cognitive relief. But even outside trauma, there's everyday clutter we accumulate. The cereal brand you looked up last week, the exact shape of your barista's earring, that one fact about penguin knees. If your brain kept all of it, daily function would slow to a crawl. Forgetting keeps cognitive pathways clear and energy-focused. The brain consumes roughly 20% of the body's total energy, despite being only about 2% of its weight. Efficient memory management is partly about conserving resources. There's another angle here too. Forgetting protects identity. Think about it. If you remembered every embarrassing moment, every awkward conversation, every minor insult, how would you ever walk into a room with confidence again? The self is not built on raw data. It's sculpted by selective memory. You're not who you were. You're who you remember yourself to be. Curiously, forgetting also fuels creativity. By losing rigid details, the mind opens space for abstraction and recombination. The forgotten lines between ideas let new connections form. In 2018, researchers at the University of Edinburgh proposed that forgetting might actually enhance creative thinking, allowing people to form original ideas by letting go of conventional associations. The poet forgets the rules. The inventor forgets the box. The brain forgets to remember things exactly so it can imagine something entirely new. Even artificial intelligence is starting to mimic this. In machine learning, some models now use techniques like dropout or intentional data pruning to prevent overfitting, essentially forgetting some of the training data to become better at generalizing. Our brains have been doing this for millennia. Of course, not all forgetting is beneficial. Neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's involve pathological forgetting, the erosion of critical memories, not selective ones. But even this tragic condition is teaching us more about the brain's memory mechanics. In Alzheimer's, amyloid plaques and tau tangles disrupt synaptic connections, suggesting that memory is deeply tied to physical brain health. What you eat, how much you sleep, whether you exercise, these all affect memory formation and forgetting. Sleep, in particular, plays a starring role. During deep sleep stages, the brain consolidates key memories and flushes away irrelevant details. It's like a janitor working the night shift, sorting through the day's mental mess. Speaking of which, ever walk into a room and forget why you went there? This isn't a personal failing. It's a phenomenon called the doorway effect. Studies show that passing through a doorway can reset short-term memory context. Your brain tags information to environments, so when the context shifts, so can access. It's weird. It's mildly frustrating, but it's completely normal. Even childhood memories vanish in a mysterious haze. This is known as childhood amnesia, the fact that most adults can't recall events before the age of 3 or 4. It's not because we weren't forming memories. The infant brain is buzzing with activity. But language development, shifting neural architecture, and emotional encoding all change how we store long-term memories. As we grow, we forget, and in doing so, we become. So next time you misplace a name, don't panic. Your brain might just be doing some spring cleaning. Forgetting is not a flaw. It's a strategy. A cognitive superpower masquerading as a momentary lapse. Every lost detail may just be your brain choosing clarity over clutter. In the vast mental attic of your life, forgetting is the quiet hand that decides what stays on the shelf and what gets tossed out with the dust. The paradox of memory is that to remember effectively, we must also forget. At first glance, this might sound like a contradiction wrapped in a mental riddle. But it's a fundamental principle of how our brains work. When memory becomes too crowded, access slows down. The more information we retain indiscriminately, the harder it becomes to find what's relevant. Like a cluttered computer desktop with thousands of unorganized files, the brain bogged down by unfiltered memory becomes sluggish and inefficient. Forgetting, in this context, becomes a form of optimization. The cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus famously demonstrated how memory is not a perfect recording, but a constantly evolving narrative. Her work in the 1970s and 1980s revealed how easily memories could be manipulated or fabricated, especially when suggestive cues were introduced. People could be led to remember things that never happened, just because their brains were trying to make sense of incomplete or ambiguous data. This malleability is not a defect. It's a side effect of how memory prioritizes adaptability over accuracy. Adaptive memory means the brain is more interested in forming useful impressions than preserving exact replicas. That's why memories shift over time. The details get blurred, but the emotional core or the general lesson remains. It's like a painter adding new strokes every time they revisit an old canvas. Forgetting details, therefore, isn't failure. It's the result of an active and intelligent memory system that constantly updates itself based on relevance. This system is supported by a region in the brain known as the prefrontal cortex. It helps regulate what gets remembered and what gets let go. The prefrontal cortex works with the hippocampus like a good editor, trimming, refining, and tossing out the less important bits so the central message stays clear. It decides whether a memory has enough weight to be kept or should be gracefully forgotten to preserve mental clarity. Then there's the concept of interference. This happens when old memories clash with new ones, or when too many similar memories pile up and confuse one another. For example, if you've ever struggled to recall a password because you recently changed it, that's interference at work. Retroactive interference occurs when new information makes it harder to remember old data, while proactive interference happens when old memories obstruct the learning of new ones. The brain, recognizing this conflict, will often forget competing information to reduce confusion. In this way, forgetting becomes a resolution strategy. The interplay between remembering and forgetting isn't just a matter of mental housekeeping. It also affects our social lives. If we remembered every slight, every awkward moment, or every embarrassing detail, our ability to maintain relationships would deteriorate. Forgiveness, after all, is made possible in part by forgetting. Not forgetting that something happened, but dulling the emotional sting over time. The fading of memory helps smooth social bonds. That dinner party argument with a friend that once felt huge. A few months later, your brain has dialed down its intensity, allowing the friendship to heal. Romantic relationships, too, depend on selective memory. The brain has a knack for amplifying positive memories in long-term partnerships and fading out the negatives. This rose-colored forgetting is more than emotional convenience. It's a cognitive bias that supports bonding. Researchers have found that couples who idealize each other's best traits and forget the minor annoyances tend to have more stable, satisfying relationships. In short, successful love may require a little bit of strategic amnesia. Even education and expertise rely on forgetting. As we learn more within a specific field, the brain discards the early, less refined understandings to make room for deeper comprehension. This is known as abstraction. A novice cook might remember exact recipes. Professional chef forgets the specific instructions but retains the principles, the flavors, the techniques. This cognitive transition from detail to concept is fueled by forgetting. And it's not just limited to human cognition. In nature, forgetting plays a critical role in survival. Many animals exhibit what's called habituation, the gradual loss of response to a repeated stimulus. For instance, a bird might initially react to a scarecrow, but soon learns to ignore it when it realizes the threat is false. This forgetting of irrelevant stimuli allows animals to focus on real dangers and conserve energy. Evolution has hardwired forgetting into biological systems as a tool for adaptive behavior. There's a practical element to forgetting in daily routines. Imagine your brain retained every movement involved in tying your shoes or brushing your teeth. These tasks would become excruciatingly slow. But through a process called procedural memory, the brain forgets the conscious steps and automates them. The act becomes a fluid behavior you can perform while thinking about something else entirely. In this way, forgetting the specifics transforms actions into seamless habits. Forgetting also shapes our experience of time. Our perception of how fast time passes is partially dependent on how much we remember. Days filled with novel, memorable experiences feel longer in hindsight, while routine days seem to vanish. This is why childhood feels stretched and dense. Every experience is new, and thus memorable. As we age and encounter fewer new stimuli, our brains forget more of the daily repetition, and time feels like it accelerates. This phenomenon is sometimes referred to as temporal compression. Forgetting, paradoxically, makes time feel faster. Emotion is another major factor influencing what gets forgotten and what gets stored. The amygdala, a brain structure involved in emotion processing, plays a key role in tagging emotionally charged memories for long-term retention. That's why you might vividly recall where you were during a significant event, but forget what you had for lunch yesterday. Emotion amplifies memory, while neutrality often leads to forgetting. This selective retention ensures we carry forward the most meaningful or potentially life-altering lessons. But this mechanism can also backfire. People with anxiety often have trouble forgetting perceived threats, even when those threats are irrational or no longer present. The brain's alarm system becomes too sensitive, retaining fear memories more rigidly than is useful. In these cases, forgetting would be helpful, but the brain refuses. Therapeutic techniques such as exposure therapy work, in part, by encouraging the brain to overwrite those fear memories and gradually forget the threat association. Interestingly, memory researchers have also discovered something called retrieval-induced forgetting. This means that by recalling certain information, you may actively suppress competing information. So every time you remember one fact clearly, you might be making it harder to remember a related fact. This dynamic shapes how our brains organize knowledge and contributes to the construction of personal narratives. Personal narratives themselves are fascinating artifacts of selective memory. We all create internal stories about who we are, based not on everything we've experienced, but on what we choose or are able to remember. This mental autobiography is inherently full of gaps, and forgetting is the editor that shapes the plot. Sometimes we forget pain to keep moving forward. Sometimes we forget success to stay humble. Sometimes we forget moments entirely, only to have them suddenly resurface with a smell, a song, or a photo. Memory and forgetting are not opposites. They are collaborators. Together, they help us learn, grow, and navigate an ever-changing world. Without forgetting, memory would be static, overwhelming, and painfully inflexible. The absence of forgetting is not photographic recall. It's often a disorder. People with hyperthymesia, a rare condition where individuals remember nearly every detail of their lives, often describe it as a burden. The inability to forget is not a gift, it's mental overload. As the brain filters the past, it quietly prepares for the future. It prioritizes what might be useful tomorrow, not what was true yesterday. This future-focused design means that forgetting is not a flaw to fix, but a feature to celebrate. Your brain, whether you realize it or not, is constantly negotiating what to keep and what to let fade. It's not negligence. It's intelligence. It's not weakness. It's wisdom. So the next time your mind goes blank or a memory slips away, consider this. Maybe your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Letting go of clutter, tuning into clarity, and remembering only what really matters. Throughout human history, memory has been romanticized as the vault of our soul, the preserver of culture, identity, and experience. But the unsung partner in this delicate dance is forgetting, the silent sculptor carving space within the mental marble. From ancient philosophers to modern neuroscientists, the role of forgetting has shifted from being seen as a nuisance to being recognized as a central pillar of cognitive health. Consider language. Children are born with the innate capacity to produce and comprehend the sounds of all languages. But as they grow, the brain prunes this universal ability, zeroing in on the specific phonetic patterns of the languages they hear most often. This is a form of forgetting, letting go of unnecessary linguistic diversity to specialize in the language of one's environment. While it means we lose the ability to distinguish certain foreign sounds without training, it also streamlines communication and processing speed. Forgetting, in this case, is how the brain becomes efficient. This principle extends to perception. The brain is constantly flooded with sensory data far more than it can process in real time, so it forgets. Visual details fade as soon as our attention shifts. Auditory background noise dissolves into unconscious static. Even physical sensations, like the feeling of your clothes against your skin, are routinely ignored unless they become relevant. This is not inattentiveness, it's the brain actively deciding what to prioritize. If we remembered every sensory input equally, we'd be trapped in a paralyzing flood of data, unable to focus or act. The same goes for decisions. When we make choices, we often forget alternative options not taken. This is known as choice-supportive bias, the tendency to remember selected options more favorably and forget the details of rejected ones. It's a psychological adaptation that reduces regret and supports confidence in decision-making. Forgetting plays a subtle but powerful role in reinforcing our sense of direction. On a broader scale, societies engage in forgetting, too. Cultural memory is curated through stories, records, and monuments, but also through what is left out. Collective forgetting allows communities to move past trauma, reshape identity, or simplify history. This can be constructive, such as efforts at reconciliation, or problematic, as in historical revisionism. Either way, it underscores how forgetting is not merely an individual act, but a social process that shapes our shared reality. Digital technology, by contrast, seems obsessed with remembering everything. We now live in an age where forgetting feels increasingly unnatural. Photos, messages, posts, search histories, all endlessly archived. The internet remembers what we wore 10 years ago, what we searched at 3 a.m., what we typed but never sent. In some ways, this digital permanence is reshaping human cognition. We rely less on memory and more on external devices to store our knowledge. This phenomenon, called the Google effect, reflects how we forget information that we know can be easily looked up. It's not laziness, strategic cognitive outsourcing. But there are psychological consequences to this shift. The inability to forget online mistakes or embarrassing moments can haunt individuals for years. Digital memory, unlike human memory, lacks mercy. It doesn't fade, it doesn't forgive. This raises profound ethical questions about the right to be forgotten, a legal concept that has gained traction in recent years as individuals push back against the Internet's unforgiving archives. Ironically, while we build machines that remember everything, we are also using machines to help us forget. Researchers are developing digital tools for therapeutic forgetting, apps that help people gradually desensitize to traumatic memories or use artificial intelligence to reframe and reinterpret past events. This technological emulation of natural forgetting shows just how central the process is to our well-being. Sleep remains one of the brain's most powerful forgetting tools. During non-REM sleep, particularly in stages 3 and 4, the brain engages in synaptic downscaling, essentially erasing or weakening synaptic connections that are deemed unimportant. This nocturnal housekeeping clears mental clutter and sharpens key memories, preparing the mind for new learning. Studies in mice have shown that brain cells shrink during sleep to allow cerebrospinal fluid to wash away waste proteins. Essentially, a neural rinse cycle, forgetting once again, is built into the very rhythm of life. But what determines which memories are kept and which are discarded? The answer lies in a complex interplay of factors: emotional salience, repetition, novelty, and social relevance. Memories tied to strong emotions or repeated often are more likely to be preserved. This is why we remember our first heartbreak or the chorus of a catchy song heard 10 times in a row. Novelty also plays a role. The brain is wired to notice and retain what stands out. In one study, participants were shown a series of images with occasional surprising objects inserted: a shoe among fruit, a penguin in a parking lot. These anomalies were remembered far more vividly than their context. The process of memory consolidation, where short-term memories become long-term, is selective. Not all experiences make the cut. The hippocampus acts as a gatekeeper, deciding which memories get transferred to the neocortex for long-term storage. This process is influenced by attention and intention, what we focus on, and what we care about. If an event is boring, stressful, or deemed irrelevant, it's more likely to fade. The brain is a storyteller, not an archivist. It weaves narratives from fragments and discards the rest. But not all forgetting is conscious or deliberate. There's also passive forgetting, where memories decay over time simply from lack of use. And there's motivated forgetting, where individuals suppress unpleasant memories. Sigmund Freud theorized this as repression, but modern science understands it more as an active neural process. Brain scans show that when people intentionally try to forget something, the prefrontal cortex engages to suppress activity in the hippocampus. This suggests that forgetting can be a goal-driven action, not just an accident. In educational settings, this has major implications. The notion that cramming leads to lasting learning is largely a myth. Without repeated retrieval and reinforcement, most information slips away within days. Spaced repetition, a method that leverages timed review intervals, works because it forces the brain to re-encode information at the right moment, just before forgetting occurs. This deliberate cycle of remembering and forgetting strengthens learning. On the flip side, creative problem-solving often benefits from letting ideas go. Incubation, the process of stepping away from a problem, allows unhelpful thoughts to fade, clearing the mental space for insights to emerge. This is why people often get their best ideas in the shower, on a walk, or just before sleep. Forgetting rigid approaches opens the door to novel solutions. In mental health, forgetting plays a therapeutic role. Cognitive behavioral therapy often involves reframing thought patterns, which in practice means forgetting old interpretations and adopting new ones. Healing from grief or loss involves a gradual forgetting of pain's intensity. Not forgetting the person, but the weight of the wound. This slow emotional dimming is not betrayal, it's recovery. Even in entertainment, forgetting adds value. Rewatching a movie or rereading a book after some time feels fresh because we've forgotten many details. The experience renews itself, offering pleasure without complete novelty. Forgetting enhances re-experience, allowing familiar joys to be rediscovered. As we grow older, we become more aware of what we've forgotten. Names, dates, facts. This natural decline in recall often causes concern, but it's worth remembering that older adults also become better at forgetting what doesn't matter. This is known as the positivity effect. The aging brain focuses more on meaningful, emotionally satisfying experiences and forgets trivial or negative ones. In this way, forgetting becomes a filter that enhances emotional well-being. Forgetting is not the erasure of memory, but the fine-tuning of awareness. It helps us navigate an overwhelming world, maintain social harmony, regulate emotion, and make efficient decisions. It's not a sign of weakness or decline. It's a cognitive feature honed by evolution. The next time a name slips your mind or a detail evades you, remember this: your brain is not failing, it's curating, it's prioritizing, it's keeping you sane. You are not a machine meant to retain everything. You are a thinking, feeling, adaptive being. And forgetting is one of your greatest mental powers. In the dance between neurons and narrative, forgetting is not merely the beat we miss, but the rhythm that makes cognition graceful. While memory collects the moments, forgetting smooths their edges, placing emphasis, tone, and direction where raw accumulation never could. To exist without forgetting would be like reading a book with every word underlined, overwhelming, indistinguishable, and exhausting. What allows stories to breathe, conversations to flow, and thoughts to evolve is precisely the act of selective omission. The absence is not a flaw in the fabric of thought. It is the space between threads that gives it form. One of the more remarkable examples of forgetting as functional comes from the domain of decision-making. When faced with complex choices, the brain often simplifies by discarding fine details. This isn't laziness, it's strategic abstraction. Studies in behavioral economics reveal that people rarely recall all facts before making a decision. Instead, they use heuristics, mental shortcuts that rely on previous patterns and strip down information. These shortcuts exist because the brain forgets irrelevant specifics while retaining the essence. It doesn't remember every calorie in every cereal, but it remembers which box says whole grain and which one gave you a sugar crash. A useful analogy is a sculptor chipping away at a block of marble. The final form doesn't emerge by adding material, but by removing it. Forgetting does this with mental material. It shapes thought, clarity, and insight, not by preserving all content, but by carefully eliminating the extraneous. And unlike marble, the brain is dynamic. It continues to reshape its sculpture in response to new experiences, beliefs, and perspectives. Forgetfulness is sometimes our first clue that the brain is reconfiguring. When a long-held belief begins to shift, whether due to new evidence, changed circumstances, or emotional growth, the details that supported the old view start to fade. This psychological forgetting is the brain's way of making room for new frameworks. It's rarely a sudden deletion. It's gradual, gentle erosion, like waves smoothing a shoreline until the original shape gives way to a new contour. Belief and memory are linked in subtle, evolving patterns, and forgetting ensures that they remain flexible. In the creative arts, forgetting allows reinvention. Musicians, writers, and painters often speak of losing themselves in the process. What they're really describing is a temporary forgetting of technique, of expectation, even of time. This mental quiet enables flow, a state of deep focus where the conscious mind steps back and the subconscious takes over. And after the work is done, creators often forget how they did it. That mystery is not failure. It's evidence that the process transcended conscious recall. Children are the masters of this art. They forget rules with astounding ease, and in doing so, invent new ones. They redraw the world constantly, not because they haven't learned it yet, but because they haven't yet learned to cling. Their minds are elastic, exploratory, and willing to let go. It's no surprise that children also tend to be more imaginative. Forgetting is one of the key drivers of play and invention. In adult life, forgetting helps manage complexity. Modern living involves a staggering array of tasks, responsibilities, and relationships. It's not practical or even possible to remember every detail. This is why external memory systems exist: calendars, to-do lists, reminders, sticky notes. Far from being a sign of weakness, these tools represent an evolved strategy of distributed cognition. The brain offloads trivial data to these systems so it can focus on more valuable tasks like analysis, empathy, and strategic thought. This interplay between internal and external memory is what allows modern civilization to function. No single person remembers how to build a plane, run a city, or grow all their food. But collectively, with the help of writing, records, and instruction, we remember just enough. The rest is forgotten, delegated, archived, or simply allowed to drift into obscurity. This forgetting isn't a crack in the system. It is the system. Forgetfulness also buffers us from emotional overwhelm. The daily micro-stresses, the awkward greetings, the missed turns, the long queues are mostly forgotten by bedtime. This mental rinse prevents minor frustrations from accumulating like emotional plaque. Even more profound experiences, such as the pain of heartbreak or loss, gradually fade in sharpness. Not because they weren't significant, but because unrelenting pain would render us paralyzed. Forgetting tempers the blow, softens the scar, and makes it possible to risk connection again. In therapy, much work involves teaching people not how to remember, but how to forget. Not by erasing memories, but by letting go of the weight attached to them. Techniques like eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing, or EMDR, leverage the brain's natural tendency to reprocess memories during periods of relaxation or altered attention. In this way, even traumatic memories can be reclassified, weakened in emotional intensity, and partially forgotten in their original form. The memory remains, but it no longer owns the person. There are, of course, exceptions. Memory savants. Individuals with highly superior autobiographical memory retain extraordinary amounts of personal detail. They can recall what they ate, wore, or did on nearly any given date. While this may sound desirable, many of these individuals describe their experience as overwhelming. The inability to forget means they relive pain, embarrassment, or loss in unfiltered clarity. Their lives become a flood of memory without respite, a constant presence of past moments that never dull. It serves as a poignant reminder that forgetting is not a limitation, it's a gift. Time itself is shaped by forgetting. Our sense of how long an experience lasted often depends on how much of it we remember. This is why novel events seem to stretch time. When you travel to a new country, every sensory experience is recorded. Every meal, every face. Later, those days feel dense, packed, almost slow. Meanwhile, routine weeks blur together, sparsely bookmarked in memory and easily forgotten. It's not that time moved faster or slower, it's that memory tracked it differently. Forgetting compresses time, remembering expands it. So if you feel that time is rushing past you, consider introducing novelty into your days. Change your route, talk to someone new, taste a different flavor. In doing so, you feed your brain memorable moments. And those moments slow time, not physically, but psychologically, giving your life a richness that repetition cannot. And yet, some forgetting happens against our will. Age brings its own brand of forgetting, names that slip away just before introduction. The reason you walked into a room, the end of a story you just started. These moments can be frustrating, even frightening. But they are also part of a natural reshaping of the brain. Older adults often have less recall of detail, but a greater capacity for wisdom, which relies on distillation rather than data. They may forget the specifics of a conversation, but remember its tone, its implication, its heart. They trade volume for depth. There's beauty in that trade. It means that as we grow, we carry less weight, not because we have less to carry, but because we've learned what to let go. Forgetting frees the mind to live in the present, to respond with nuance, to hold space for others. It creates room for spontaneity, reflection, and peace. Some cultures even ritualize forgetting. In Japan, the practice of cleaning and discarding objects is tied to letting go of the past. In certain ceremonies, people write down regrets or sorrows and burn them. These acts are not about erasure, but transformation. By forgetting deliberately, They honor memory while releasing its burden. In the end, forgetting is not the loss of something precious. It is the forging of something lighter. It is the invisible hand that edits your story, ensuring that it's not just accurate, but meaningful. That you don't just remember, but understand. That you don't just carry, but continue. The brain, with all its complexity and chemical choreography, is not a perfect historian. It does not chronicle events like a camcorder, nor does it preserve each detail with mechanical accuracy. Instead, it functions more like a storyteller with a very selective memory, one who omits, exaggerates, compresses, and sometimes invents. And much of this storytelling is possible only because of forgetting. For every memory stored, countless others are discarded, faded, or transformed. This is not corruption of truth. It is the refinement of meaning. We can see the evidence of this process most clearly in how we recall our childhood. Often, when people try to summon memories from early life, they find them to be foggy, disconnected, or suspiciously influenced by family stories and photographs. This haziness isn't a bug in memory. It's part of how the brain develops. Childhood amnesia, the inability to recall memories from the first few years of life, is a nearly universal phenomenon. It stems from the fact that the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, essential components for long-term memory storage, are still maturing during early childhood. Even though young children can form short-term memories, most of them are not encoded deeply enough to survive into adulthood. Yet, ironically, many adults have vivid mental images of events they can't possibly remember. Being born, taking first steps, or riding in a stroller. These memories are often reconstructions pieced together from photos, stories told by others, or even imagined scenarios. This process of filling in gaps with manufactured memory is called confabulation. Surprisingly common. The brain would often rather create a plausible narrative than admit a blank space. Forgetting, then, makes room for creativity. In memory's gaps, the imagination plants seeds. The flexibility of memory, its constant editing, updating, forgetting, is also what allows us to change. If every moment from our past were perfectly preserved, our sense of identity would be rigid and fossilized. But because we forget, we can revise. We can reinterpret old failures as stepping stones, old pain as lessons. Forgetting gives us the psychological wiggle room to reinvent ourselves. This becomes especially important in healing from emotional trauma. While the event may not disappear from memory, the forgetting of the emotional intensity surrounding it allows for recovery. Over time, details blur, the sting softens, and distance grows. This is not denial, 'tis resilience. In many therapeutic contexts, healing is a process of memory modulation, transforming vivid, emotionally overwhelming recollections into calmer, manageable fragments. The brain is not erasing, but retuning. Interestingly, not all forgetting is purely neurological. Some of it is strategic. We forget, not just because our brains fade memories naturally, but because we choose to. Think of how often people say, "I don't want to think about it," or "let's just forget it ever happened." These are cognitive directives, commands, given to the self, often subconsciously, to file certain experiences into the mental junk drawer. While these moments may resurface later, they are often temporarily suppressed, buried under the more pressing needs of the present. This kind of intentional forgetting has even been studied in laboratory settings. In controlled experiments, participants were shown lists of words and instructed to forget certain ones. Remarkably, many were able to do so, and brain scans revealed increased activity in the prefrontal cortex when attempting to suppress memories. This suggests that forgetting can be a controlled, top-down process. Not all memories are equal, and not all of them are invited to stay. Cultural practices also encourage forgetting in unique ways. In oral traditions, stories are passed down not with exact replication, but with embellishment, adaptation, and omission. Each retelling involves forgetting some details while emphasizing others. Over generations, the stories evolve, not just because of poor memory, but because of a deliberate shaping of narrative to reflect changing values, norms, and environments. Forgetting becomes a cultural tool for relevance. Religious rituals too often involve forgetting. Confession, absolution, rites of passage. All symbolically or literally encourage the letting go of past actions or identities. In these contexts, forgetting is spiritual hygiene, a way to purify the mind and soul for renewal. Whether or not the brain actually deletes the memory, the ritual provides the psychological permission to move on. Even in science, forgetting has its place. The scientific method is built on the premise that old theories may eventually be replaced. When a new paradigm emerges, like when Einstein's theories eclipsed Newton's in certain contexts, there is an institutional forgetting of what came before. Not erasure, but relegation. Textbooks are rewritten, curricula updated, and the collective memory shifts. Scientific forgetting, then, is progress. It is how we adapt knowledge to better match reality. In everyday life, forgetting also acts as a filter for attention. At any given moment, the brain is processing an overwhelming volume of sensory input. Millions of bits of data streaming in from the eyes, ears, skin, and internal organs. But only a fraction of this information reaches conscious awareness. The rest is filtered out, forgotten before it even becomes memory. This is a crucial function. It keeps us from drowning in noise. It allows us to focus on what matters: a friend's voice in a crowd, a car approaching from the corner of our eye, the scent of something burning on the stove. This attention-based forgetting is orchestrated largely by the brain's default mode network, a system of interacting brain regions that manages internal thought, memory, and awareness. When the brain is at rest, or not focused on the outside world, this network becomes active, helping to consolidate relevant memories and discard the unnecessary. It's like a night shift crew, quietly sorting through the day's data and deciding what to keep. Perhaps the most underappreciated role of forgetting is its impact on compassion. To truly forgive, we often must forget, not the facts of what happened, but the fury, the indignation, the feeling of betrayal. Forgetting in this context is not weakness. It's emotional discipline. It allows relationships to recover, families to heal, communities to move forward. Without forgetting, justice would become revenge, memory would become burden, and peace would remain out of reach. In philosophical terms, forgetting is closely linked with freedom. The ability to forget liberates us from the past. It allows us to redefine who we are without being endlessly chained to who we were. It gives us the option to start over, to break patterns, to choose something different. Without forgetting, personal evolution would be stifled, bound by a never-ending loop of old thoughts and stale experiences. And yet, the brain never really forgets everything. Even memories we think are lost may linger, dormant, waiting for the right trigger. A smell, a sound, a certain quality of light, and suddenly, we're back in a room from 20 years ago. These moments, often described as Proustian, after the famous scene in Search of Lost Time, remind us that forgetting is rarely absolute. It's more like misplacing than destroying. These forgotten memories can resurface at the strangest times, often bringing with them waves of nostalgia, sadness, joy, or confusion. They show us how much of who we are lies beneath the surface, not gone, just resting. Forgetting doesn't mean losing. It means reprioritizing. And sometimes what was once forgotten returns with a new layer of meaning. Even in romantic relationships, forgetting plays a vital role. The brain tends to remember the highs and lows of past romances while letting go of the mundane. This selective forgetting helps us fall in love again, by painting past love with soft focus lenses and making space for hope. If we remembered every squabble and insecurity in perfect detail, we might never open our hearts again. Forgetting is what lets us hope that this time might be different. At a societal level, this same mechanism applies to how we view history. Nations remember triumphs and tragedies, but they also forget inconvenient truths. While this selective memory can lead to denial and distortion, it can also foster unity. Memorials and commemorations, for instance, are acts of both remembering and forgetting, focusing collective attention on certain events while allowing others to fade. Societies, like individuals, must balance memory with mercy. Ultimately, forgetting is not just something the brain does, it is something we must do, consciously, gently, wisely. We forget to heal. We forget to forgive. We forget to dream again. And sometimes, we forget simply to remember better. Because when the noise is stripped away, what remains is what truly matters. To forget is to shape space in the mind, not emptiness. Not loss, but deliberate clearance. A mental decluttering that allows awareness to move more freely, more precisely. Just as the sculptor must remove stone to reveal form, just as the composer uses silence to give music rhythm, the brain uses forgetting to sculpt understanding. And what remains after forgetting is often not less than before, but more clarity, more insight, more capacity to move forward without dragging the entire weight of lived experience behind us. This process is neither random nor careless. Forgetting is surprisingly methodical. One of the primary mechanisms believed to support this process is long-term depression, a neurological function that selectively weakens synaptic connections. When certain neural pathways go unused, the brain diminishes their strength. Not out of neglect, but because it operates under the principle of efficiency. Use it, and the connection grows stronger. Ignore it, and the signal fades. This is not decay, it's prioritization. This synaptic recalibration explains why, over time, we lose fluency in languages we don't speak, forget skills we no longer practice, or struggle to recall names of classmates from decades ago. The brain, recognizing disuse, quietly redirects its energy toward more relevant neural circuits. It is not sentimental, it is strategic. The trade-off is obvious in practical life. If every language you were exposed to remained active, if every friend you ever had remained emotionally vivid, your mental world would quickly become an overcrowded gallery of ghosts. Forgetting ensures that only the current and the meaningful remain in focus. It's the mental version of turning the lights off in rooms you no longer live in. And this strategic forgetting can be consciously managed. People who specialize in memory training, often referred to as memory athletes, understand the value of deliberate association and, equally, the value of clearing those associations when they are no longer needed. They use techniques like the method of loci, creating mental maps where information is stored in imagined locations. But they also train themselves to reset these maps, to forget in order to make space for the next challenge. For them, forgetting is a tool, sharpened and wielded with skill. The average person may not build memory palaces, but we do curate our mental world in subtler ways. We develop habits of attention. We place emotional significance on certain experiences. We revisit some memories and let others rot untouched. Every act of remembering is also an act of forgetting something else. Focus demands exclusion. Thought demands silence. Without forgetting, the noise would overwhelm the signal. Yet for all its utility, forgetting can be terrifying. The idea of losing a loved one's voice, the memory of a pivotal moment, or even a part of ourselves, these are anxieties woven deeply into human consciousness. We build entire industries around remembrance. Photographs, journals, gravestones, digital backups, anniversary traditions, all of them defy the natural fade. They serve as anchors against the slow drift of forgetting. But even these anchors are imperfect. Look back at old photographs and you may remember the setting, the outfit, the general context, but rarely the emotions. The smell in the air, the exact sound of a friend's laughter, the inner state you were living in that day. The moment becomes a postcard, neat but shallow. No matter how hard we try, memory decays. Not always in content, but in feeling. And sometimes that's the kindest thing time can offer. Because forgetting is the balm over the burn of memory. The blunt edge that rounds off sharp moments. It doesn't erase, it erodes, it dulls. And in this dulling, pain becomes tolerable, rage becomes manageable, loss becomes breathable. Time heals, they say, but it is forgetting that does the healing. Nowhere is this clearer than in the natural passage of grief. Initially, grief feels like a complete invasion. Every thought, every waking hour filled with absence. But slowly, imperceptibly, forgetting does its work. Not forgetting the person, not the love, but the piercing freshness of the loss. The brain, guided by its primal need for stability, gradually allows the memory to coexist with other thoughts, other emotions. One day, the sadness isn't the first thing that arrives in the morning. One day, laughter returns. Not because we've stopped remembering, but because forgetting has made remembering livable. There's a strange generosity in this process. The brain does not ask permission. It does not demand rituals. It simply begins. A forgotten number here, a softened image there. The sound of a voice once clear, now arriving through fog. And yet, meaning remains. The outline of a person still stands. Memory is never total, and forgetting is never absolute. In romantic terms, forgetting has often been seen as betrayal. The idea that to truly love someone is to never forget them, to carry their image in pristine detail forever. But this is not how the mind works, nor should it be. True love is not threatened by forgetting. In fact, forgetting allows love to evolve. It clears away petty disagreements, tempers past hurts, and lets new moments take precedence over old ones. A relationship with memory is a living thing. It changes as we do. And this applies just as strongly to the memory of self. Who we are today is not the same as who we were 5 years ago. If we remembered every decision, every misstep, every insecurity with perfect clarity, we'd remain frozen in our former selves. But forgetting frees us. It allows the self to stretch, to recalibrate, to breathe. This is how growth happens. Not by dragging every version of ourselves into the present, but by forgetting just enough to step into something new. The capacity to forget also enables forgiveness, not just of others, but of ourselves. Regret is one of the most stubborn forms of memory, but even it is worn down by time and disuse. The brain cannot hold every guilt forever. It must let go. And in that letting go, we find the possibility of peace. Interestingly, forgetting is now being examined not just as a function of the brain, but as a function of artificial intelligence. In the realm of machine learning, forgetting is being built into algorithms. Some models use techniques like elastic weight consolidation, dropout, or memory decay to mimic the brain's strategy of forgetting outdated or irrelevant data. This isn't just about storage space, it's about adaptability. Machines, like minds, function better when they're not chained to everything they've ever learned. Some researchers have even argued that without forgetting, true artificial intelligence would be impossible. Learning isn't just the accumulation of facts, it's the ability to discard obsolete ones. To forget is to adapt. To forget is to survive change. And if machines are to mirror human cognition, they too must learn how to forget. This idea aligns with biological evolution. Forgetting has likely been selected for in natural systems because of its advantages in learning, decision-making, and resource management. Brains that forget are lighter, faster, more agile. Brains that remember too much are bogged down, indecisive, vulnerable to overload. In evolution, efficiency often trumps completeness. Forgetting isn't just useful, it's essential. Even in the animal kingdom, signs of forgetting are everywhere. Birds forget the location of food caches after certain seasons. Primates forget social conflicts after reconciliation. Dogs forget commands they no longer use. These aren't deficits. They are signs of cognitive streamlining. Forgetting ensures that animals, like humans, are not trapped in static loops of past behavior. It allows for flexibility in response to new environments. And in human culture, this adaptability is mirrored in trends, language, and art. Fashion forgets the old to make space for the new. Language forgets obsolete words to streamline communication. Art forgets techniques and rediscoveries, constantly moving in cycles of forgetting and reinvention. Culture is memory, yes, but it is memory curated by forgetting. Even humor relies on forgetting. Joke is funny, partly because it surprises us, because we momentarily forget the expectation and are blindsided by the twist. Without forgetfulness, there is no punchline, only repetition. Comedy, like memory, thrives on timing and the careful management of what is remembered and what is left behind. In all these ways, forgetting emerges not as a failure of memory, but its partner, not its weakness, but its whisper of restraint. Forgetting allows memory to focus. It lets us breathe between thoughts. It protects us from the tyranny of total recall. It is the silent architect of our sanity. When we think of intelligence, we often imagine a mind packed with facts, its details, and vast troves of data, an endless library of stored information ready for retrieval at any moment. But true intelligence, both in humans and in the artificial systems we build, relies just as much on forgetting. Because without the ability to discard, filter, and ignore, memory would turn into noise. A mind that forgets nothing remembers nothing well. It recalls the trees, but loses the forest. In practical terms, our ability to reason, to infer, to decide, depends on our capacity to shed information that is no longer relevant. When a chess grandmaster scans a board, they don't remember every move ever played by every opponent they've faced. Instead, they forget thousands of irrelevant patterns to focus on the few that matter now. Forgetting enables precision. It is the sculptor's chisel to the marble of memory. This is true for survival too. Consider phobias. While fear is protective in dangerous situations, if the brain failed to forget a fear response after a threat has passed, it would trap us in cycles of panic. Imagine being chased by a dog as a child and remaining terrified of all dogs for the rest of your life, no matter how gentle they are. In many anxiety disorders, this failure to forget is exactly what happens. The memory of fear becomes too sticky. It clings to the brain's emotional circuits, refusing to fade. Therapy in these cases helps retrain the brain to let go, to forget the association between safety and threat. And there is research to support this. Studies on extinction learning, a process where conditioned responses to fear are weakened, show that forgetting fear associations is not erasure, but recontextualization. The brain learns that a stimulus once associated with danger is no longer threatening, and slowly the response fades. This is forgetting as adaptation. Forgetting not as deletion, but as transformation. Yet even in non-traumatic experiences, this same mechanism is always at work. Take something as simple as grocery shopping. It's a list you made in your head. Bananas, cereal, toothpaste was only ever meant to be temporary. Once the task is done, your brain discards the list without effort. If it didn't, your mind would be littered with obsolete errands and expired intentions. This short-term forgetting is what keeps daily life manageable. And the mechanism that manages this flow of memory is elegant. Working memory, which allows us to hold a few pieces of information at a time, is deeply intertwined with attention. When you shift your focus, the contents of working memory fade rapidly unless there's a compelling reason to retain them. This moment-to-moment triage allows the brain to remain nimble. Forgetting isn't a lapse in the system, it is the system. A similar pattern plays out in the realm of education. While much effort is focused on helping students remember information, successful learning is often about learning what to forget as well. A child learning arithmetic might initially memorize tables and rules, but as they progress, they forget the mechanics in favor of intuition. They no longer count on fingers, they just know. And that knowing is made possible by forgetting the scaffolding that supported them early on. Learning, in the deepest sense, is forgetting the steps and absorbing the form. This idea becomes even more evident in expertise. A seasoned doctor doesn't recall every case study they've ever read. Instead, they forget the irrelevant and remember the patterns. It's the symptoms that matter, the red flags, the rare presentations. Their memory is tuned not by volume, but by usefulness. Forgetting in these contexts allows speed, confidence, and action. This selective forgetting is not accidental, something the brain does through repeated exposure, reflection, and error. Each time we make a mistake and correct it, we reinforce the relevant path and suppress the alternatives. This suppression is a kind of forgetting, the gradual fading of wrong turns so that the right ones become instinct. This is why practice doesn't just make perfect, it makes forgetting possible. The pianist no longer thinks about finger placement. The cyclist no longer recalls the first time they balanced. The surgeon no longer rehearses every incision in their mind. Repetition leads to automation, and automation depends on the forgetting of the conscious steps. Mastery is forgetting made invisible. This process becomes even more fascinating when applied to language. In acquiring a second language, learners often reach a stage where they begin to forget direct translations. They no longer think in their first language and then convert, they simply know the word. This fluency depends on forgetting the intermediary. It's forgetting that unlocks flow. And then there's the paradoxical truth that sometimes we need to forget in order to remember, known as retrieval interference. This phenomenon occurs when trying to recall too many similar things at once makes it harder to access any of them. If you've ever struggled to remember a specific password among a dozen variations, you felt this. The brain, overwhelmed by overlapping memories, fumbles. But when you take a break, step away, distract yourself, you often remember instantly. That's because in forgetting the interference, the target memory reemerges. Clarity comes not from holding on tighter, but from letting go. In this way, forgetting becomes not the enemy of memory, but its assistant, its organizer, its bouncer at the door. It is forgetting that makes memory elegant. It's not a cluttered attic, but a curated gallery. The power of forgetting even shows up. In morality, as societies evolve, they often forget past injustices, both deliberately and unconsciously. While this forgetting can enable healing, it can also enable repetition. The ethical danger lies not in forgetting itself, but in forgetting without learning. To forget pain without understanding its source invites it to return. This is why remembrance rituals, historical education, and public acknowledgement are necessary, to ensure that forgetting is informed, not blind. But forgetting also allows hope. After all, if every failure were permanently seared into our minds, optimism would be impossible. We'd never apply again after rejection, never love again after heartbreak, never try again after loss. Forgetting dulls the weight of defeat, lets us believe that things can be better, that the future can still surprise us. This is perhaps the most quietly powerful gift of forgetting. It makes resilience possible. It allows us to be reborn, not through grand transformations, but through the everyday miracle of emotional erosion. Disappointments that once felt monumental become small. Embarrassments that once seemed paralyzing are now just anecdotes. Regrets fade into curiosity. Forgetting softens the edges of experience, giving life a second wind. Even in storytelling, forgetting is part of the craft. Authors do not recount every moment. They skip, they summarize, they imply. The story breathes because so much is left out. Memory does the same. Our autobiographies are stitched together from scraps. And what we forget is often as revealing as what we remember. The absence draws its own silhouette. In the end, forgetting is a form of editing, not reckless deletion, but considered revision. It is the final touch that gives thought its shape, memory its purpose, and life its continuity. The brain is not a storage unit. It is an instrument, and forgetting is how it tunes itself. The mind, ever shifting, does not merely store the past. It recreates it, reassembles it, rewrites it. This continual reconstruction would be impossible without forgetting. Memory, it turns out, is less like a file cabinet and more like wet clay. Each time we remember something, we handle it, reshape it slightly. Press it against our current emotions, beliefs, and perspectives. And when we set it down again, it is subtly changed. Forgetting allows this process to occur. It creates the softness in the clay. Without forgetting, memory would harden, unchangeable and unusable. In this sense, forgetting gives memory life. It lets us adapt the past to the present to understand who we were through who we are. A moment remembered perfectly is disconnected from meaning, but a moment remembered partially, faded at the edges, colored by feeling, is fertile. It can evolve. It can teach. One of the most striking examples of this phenomenon is found in eyewitness testimony. Despite popular belief, memory is not particularly reliable when it comes to the precise details of events. Witnesses to the same incident often recall different things, influenced by stress, suggestion, and expectation. And yet, the confidence with which they remember is often high. This is because the mind fills in forgotten elements with assumptions and inferences. It smooths out inconsistencies, completes fragments, creates cohesion. This isn't lying, it's storytelling. And it happens beneath awareness. This insight has profound implications for law, education, and interpersonal relationships. It reminds us that memory is not the truth. It is our version of the truth. Forgetting, by removing some details, opens space for others to dominate. It can amplify bias, yes, but it can also clear away distortions. A painful conversation, revisited years later, may feel less aggressive, less pointed, because the emotional weight has faded. Forgetting becomes the filter through which mercy enters memory. This is especially important when it comes to self-perception. The person we see in the mirror is not the person we remember from years ago, and the self we imagine we were at age 10 or 20 is a version crafted by forgetting, by overlooking awkwardness, exaggerating talents, simplifying motivations. We forget the internal chaos of growing up, the confusion of adolescence, the fear behind our bravado. What we retain is the story we can live with, not false, but curated. This curation process becomes more intentional as we age. Older adults tend to focus more on emotionally positive memories and are more likely to forget the negative ones. This is not due to a decline in ability, but a shift in motivational priorities. Psychologists call this the positivity effect. As time horizons shrink, the brain emphasizes emotional well-being over information accuracy. It forgets what drains and remembers what nourishes. Neurologically, this shift is reflected in reduced amygdala activation during negative experiences. In older adults, and increased activity in areas associated with emotion regulation. This suggests that the brain learns, with time, to forget what doesn't serve us. Wisdom, it seems, is not just knowing what to remember, but knowing what to forget. But forgetting is not always gentle. It can arrive suddenly, disruptively, even frighteningly. This is most visible in cases of amnesia, whether brought on by injury, illness, or psychological trauma. Amnesia reveals how dependent our sense of identity is on memory. People with retrograde amnesia may forget their own names, families, or histories. Those with anterograde amnesia cannot form new memories. In both cases, the result is disorientation. A life without memory feels unmoored, untethered. It is not simply that the past is gone. It is that the self becomes uncertain. And yet, even in these extreme cases, something curious often remains. Emotional responses, muscle memory, fragments of personality. A song may bring tears, even if the person cannot recall why. A touch may feel familiar without explanation. Suggests that forgetting is layered, and not all layers are lost at once. Some memories live deeper than words. They are not stored, but embedded, like grooves in stone. Similarly, dementia, especially Alzheimer's disease, underscores the fragility of memory. As neurons degenerate and synapses weaken, forgetting becomes involuntary and progressive. And with it, identity slowly dissolves. But even here, moments of lucidity appear. A familiar face, a childhood melody, a scent of old perfume. These can light up dormant corners of the mind. And for a fleeting second, the person returns. These flashes are reminders that forgetting, though relentless, is not always final. Memory is not a fortress, it is a garden. And even in decline, it blooms. In response to these losses, people create memory aids. Photographs, voice recordings, journals. These external memories serve as scaffolding when the internal ones begin to wobble. They are not substitutes, but supports. They remind us of who we've been when our minds can't. They hold space for us to return to ourselves. But reliance on these aids also raises questions about the balance between remembering and forgetting in the digital age. Now more than ever, we document everything. Conversations are archived, steps are tracked, photos are time-stamped and stored in clouds. We've never had so much access to the past, and yet we forget to look at it. This paradox of endless documentation and shallow reflection suggests that remembering is not about possession, but engagement. To truly remember something, we must interact with it, revisit it, reprocess it. Otherwise, it becomes digital clutter, forgotten despite being preserved. And there's another risk. When we rely too heavily on devices to remember for us, our natural memory weakens. Studies have shown that when people believe information is stored somewhere else, like on a phone or a search engine, they're less likely to remember it themselves. This is called digital amnesia. It reflects the brain's efficient outsourcing, but it also points to a loss of internal depth. Remembering with your mind is different than remembering with your phone. The former shapes who you are. The latter merely retrieves data. So the challenge becomes one of balance. To remember enough to retain identity, meaning, and context. And to forget enough to remain open, adaptive, and emotionally free. To choose what to carry forward and what to lay down. This choice is mirrored in literature, especially in memoir. Memoirs are not complete records. They are intentional recollections. The author decides what to remember, what to forget, and how to shape it all into something coherent. The result is not a document, but a portrait, a version of a life. And readers don't expect perfect accuracy, they expect resonance. What matters is not the completeness, but the clarity. Our own memories function much the same way. We don't remember every step, but we remember the turning points. We don't remember every word, but we remember the feeling. Our minds are memorists, not machines. Forgetting gives them their art. Even in science fiction, forgetting plays a central role. The trope of memory erasure from movies to novels often explores ethical dilemmas. What happens when we remove pain? When we forget grief? Would we still be ourselves without sorrow, without mistakes? These stories remind us that forgetting is not just practical, it is philosophical. It forces us to ask, what do we want to remember, and why? And perhaps the answer changes over time. In youth, we seek to remember everything. We chase moments, photograph sunsets, write diaries, record experiences. But as we age, we begin to curate. We choose what matters most. We allow time to edit our memories into something survivable, something sacred. So forgetting is not failure. It is surrender. A peaceful, necessary surrender to the flow of time. It is how we make peace with the past, how we keep walking, how we allow tomorrow to be more than just yesterday repeated. There is a kind of elegance in forgetting, a quiet, graceful wisdom that the mind employs without fanfare. It does not ask us to evaluate each memory, nor does it seek our approval to let go. Instead, forgetting simply begins its work. And in doing so, it reveals a deeper intelligence at play. The brain does not need to hold every detail to understand the whole. It does not need to replay every moment to know what mattered. It forgets not because it is weak, but because it is designed to focus on the meaningful over the exhaustive. In a world of infinite stimuli, forgetting is the mind's most powerful act of curation. This curation reveals itself clearly in moments of reflection. When we think back over our lives, we do not access a perfect timeline. We remember scenes, themes, emotions. Our life in memory feels like a novel with highlighted chapters and missing pages. We remember the first time we were truly afraid, the warmth of a particular summer, a mistake we regret, the night someone we loved said something kind. These memories are vivid, not because we preserved them carefully, but because forgetting allowed them to stand alone. The backdrop has faded. The moment remains. This process is essential to how we form identity. Without forgetting, we would be buried under every thought we ever had. We would see every failure, every hurtful comment, every awkward moment with the same sharpness as the day they occurred. Our self-concept would be unstable, constantly disrupted by memory's endless feedback. But forgetting smooths these disruptions. It allows us to move forward with a sense of continuity. We forget selectively, sculpting the story of who we are from what we choose, consciously or not, to carry forward. In neuroscience, this selectivity is partially explained by the interaction between the hippocampus, which encodes memory, and the prefrontal cortex, which regulates relevance. Together, they perform a constant dance, deciding what to store, what to discard, and what to revisit. This process is influenced by novelty, emotion, repetition, and importance. A boring meeting may disappear overnight, and emotionally charged. Conversation might linger for decades. This is forgetting as filtration. But forgetting is not always tidy. Sometimes we forget things we wish we hadn't, where we left the keys, the name of a favorite book, the face of someone long gone. These absences can feel cruel, even disorienting. But they are not a malfunction. They are a reflection of the brain's priorities, and those priorities change. A forgotten detail today may return unbidden tomorrow, triggered by a smell, a sound, or a familiar phrase. This is known as spontaneous retrieval, and it suggests that many forgotten memories are not gone but buried, unindexed, unrehearsed, and waiting. Memory is layered, and forgetting is stratified. Some forgetting is surface level, easy to reverse. Some is structural, harder to retrieve. And some is emotional memories that we have distanced ourselves from to protect our sense of safety or coherence. Often, it is these emotional memories that require forgetting most urgently, not because they are untrue, but because they are unrelenting. This is why therapeutic forgetting is central to recovery. People who've experienced trauma often suffer not because they remember too little, but because they remember too much. Their memories are loud, unprocessed, ever-present. Forgetting in this context is not about deletion, but about transforming those memories into quieter echoes. Not forgotten entirely, but defanged. And the tools for this transformation are varied. Talking, writing, art, sleep, reframing. Each of these activities gives the mind a chance to revisit memory from a new angle, to soften the narrative, to let emotion dissolve. Over time, the sharpness fades, and what remains is a kind of scar, not open, not painful, but present. A reminder, not a wound. Forgetting is also tied to sleep. During sleep, especially during rapid eye movement REM sleep, the brain performs essential maintenance on memory. It consolidates important experiences and sheds the clutter. This nocturnal forgetting is not accidental. It is orchestrated. The brain evaluates which neural connections to strengthen and which to prune. Like a gardener at night, it trims the branches that no longer bear fruit. Studies have shown that people deprived of sleep struggle with memory accuracy. They may form memories poorly, forget quickly, or misattribute details. This reflects the brain's reliance on forgetting as a nightly task. Sleep is not just for rest, it's for mental housekeeping. Without it, the garden of memory becomes overgrown. But even in waking life, forgetting can be protective. It prevents what some psychologists call overfitting, a condition in which the brain clings too tightly to specific details and fails to generalize. If every experience remained as vivid as the original, we'd be unable to see patterns. We'd fail to recognize that a frown today means the same as a frown last week. Forgetting helps us abstract. It helps us see the forest, not just the trees. This is why forgetting is so critical to learning. It keeps the brain from getting stuck. It allows us to absorb the lesson without being chained to the moment, to remember what matters and let the rest go. In relationships, forgetting plays a quieter, more emotional role. It allows us to let people be more than their worst moments. A friend who once forgot your birthday is not forever marked by that mistake because you forget. Not because you ignore it, but because you choose to weigh it lightly. Spouses forget harsh words. Parents forget tantrums. Siblings forget rivalries. This is the kindness of forgetting. The human heart could not carry every offense. Forgetting, in these moments, is not carelessness, it is love. And just as forgetting heals, it also fosters joy. Think of how many times you've laughed at the same joke because you forgot the punchline. Or how music can delight you again and again because you forget the precise timing of each note. Surprise, delight, curiosity, all are supported by the mind's willingness to forget. Without forgetting, nothing would feel new. Every song would be known. Every twist would be anticipated. Every gift would be spoiled. It is forgetting that renews the world. It is forgetting that keeps us amazed. This is also why rituals, holidays, and celebrations feel meaningful year after year. We forget just enough to make each return feel fresh. Each birthday is new, not because we forget we've had one before, but because we forget the details that would make it stale. This forgetting is not denial, it is renewal, a subtle reset. And finally, forgetting is what allows for silence. In conversation, in reflection, in presence. If the mind remembered everything with perfect fidelity, it would never stop speaking, never stop spinning. Forgetting allows the mind to rest. It creates quiet. It creates stillness. And in stillness, we rediscover peace. In this way, forgetting is not an absence. It is a presence, a shaping force. It sculpts thought, cradles memory, cushions emotion, and clears the way for what's next. It is not an eraser. It is a guide. And it is always at work, subtly and without applause, allowing us to remember what truly matters. If we could somehow step outside the mind and witness its operations from above, the act of forgetting would not appear as chaos, but as choreography. Not as a glitch, but as a rhythm. Thoughts come and go, impressions fade, emotions soften, all according to an intricate pattern not entirely visible from within. The mind is not hoarding, it is composing. Forgetting is not absence, it is cadence. And this cadence is what keeps memory alive. This rhythm begins early in life. Infants forget constantly and necessarily. In fact, they must forget to grow. Their brains are born with more synaptic connections than they need, a dense web of possible pathways. Over time, through experience and forgetting, the brain prunes what isn't used. This process, called synaptic pruning, is essential to cognition. Without it, the brain becomes inefficient, confused, and overloaded. Forgetting, then, is not the end of development, it is development. It is what makes maturity possible. And as we move through life, forgetting continues to shape our understanding, not just of ourselves, but of others. It allows us to read between the lines, to ignore noise and see what matters. When someone speaks, we forget the unimportant words and remember the meaning. When we tell stories, we forget the dates and remember the feeling. When we grow close to someone, we forget the awkward beginnings and remember the shared laughter. Memory is social, and forgetting is what allows intimacy to deepen. It also allows conflict to fade. A society that cannot forget is a society unable to heal. Not every wound deserves erasure, but without some selective amnesia, cultures would remain paralyzed by history. Nations, like individuals, must let some things slip into silence. Not to deny them, but to move forward. Truth commissions, public apologies, and reconciliation efforts are all built on this understanding, that forgetting and remembering are not enemies, but partners in peace. This partnership extends even to our aspirations, our ability to pursue. The future depends on our ability to forget past failures. The inventor who burned through dozens of prototypes, the author who faced countless rejections, the athlete who stumbled, each must forget just enough to keep trying. Hope, it turns out, is built on forgetting. If we remembered every fall with full emotional weight, we would never rise again. Even creativity thrives on forgetting. Great artists, writers, and thinkers often report the necessity of forgetting their influences in order to find their voice. The dancer must forget the mirror. The writer must forget the rules. The composer must forget the theory. Forgetting, here, is the leap beyond imitation. It is the birth of originality. This is why the most fertile moments of inspiration often arrive after a period of disconnection. A walk, a nap, a shower. These are the spaces where the mind forgets its conscious effort and allows something new to surface. The brain, freed from the grip of direct focus, rearranges fragments into new forms. Innovation is born in forgetting, not forgetting the goal, but forgetting the method, and this principle holds in science too. Many breakthroughs come not from relentless analysis, but from a period of letting go. The unconscious mind, unburdened by conscious repetition, connects dots in the background. A solution appears in a dream. A theory takes shape in a moment of idleness. These are not accidents. They are the products of a brain that knows when to forget what it's trying to remember. This cyclical forgetting and remembering echoes in the natural world as well. Trees forget their leaves each year. The ocean forgets its waves. Seasons forget the last and begin again. This rhythm is not loss. It is renewal. It is how life breathes. And the brain, being part of nature, breathes in the same way. It must let go to begin again, so that it can continue to learn, to grow, to survive. But forgetting is not uniform. Some things resist it. The smell of a certain perfume, The sound of a parent's voice, a first love, a final goodbye. These memories remain vivid, not by force, but by resonance, have become part of the self. They do not require effort to recall. They are stitched into identity. These are the anchors in a sea of forgetting. And it is this contrast, the forgotten and the unforgettable, that gives memory its texture. We are not meant to remember everything, nor are we meant to forget completely. We are meant to carry fragments, to be shaped by echoes, to let some things fall away so that others may stand out. In the end, forgetting teaches us what matters, what returns unbidden, what persists despite silence, what lives even in the absence of words. So perhaps we should not fear forgetting. Perhaps we should see it as a kindness, a quiet intelligence, a gift of the brain that allows us to keep living not in spite of the past, but because we are not trapped inside it. And as you lie here now, wherever you are, in whatever corner of the world you've paused for rest, remember this: the mind is doing its work, even in silence, even in stillness. It is shaping, it is releasing, it is remembering what to forget. Thank you for watching this video from the Sleepness Scientist channel, a place where science meets softness and ideas drift quietly through the mind. We hope this exploration of forgetting brought you something, whether knowledge, comfort, or a moment of peace. We're sorry if we kept you awake or made sleep a little slower to arrive, but we're always grateful that you stayed. Please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. And now, let your thoughts settle. Let the rhythms of forgetting carry you gently through the night. In a moment, soothing sounds will take over, sounds without meaning, without memory. Just space, just calm. Sleep well. Good night.
you.